Let's dive in here to the Cincinnati Bengals. And before we fully get into Trey Hendrickson, I want to spend some time talking about the Pro Bowl, which went down last night, and the news about Troy Walters, Bengals wide receivers coach. He's going to be staying here as the wide receiver coach for the Cincinnati Bengals. So let's start with the Pro Bowl. Once you get the news that Burrow was a late addition, you flip it on, right? If you're a Bengals fan, right? T's there. Jamar's there. Both the Joes are there. Like, yeah, let's flip it on. Let's see what's going on, right? So that's what I did. And, a lot of people were killing the Pro Bowl here this morning and certainly live as it was happening. And I understand that. I think there's some adjustments that need to be made, right? I mean, the final score was, 66 to 50-something? Yeah, 66 to 52. So the NFL, they got to shrink the quarters down because they did 15-minute quarters, and it felt like they've been playing for a good period of time. And you look up, and they're halfway through the first quarter. So got to make an adjustment there with the length. But, it wasn't the end of the world, right? There's some adjustments that need to happen. I mean, a lot of stars were still there. There was some cool plays. Obviously, it's not like what the Pro Bowl once was, but there was some tinkering that needs to be done. I thought Jamar made a couple of insane plays, and so did Joe as well. They had Jamar out there on defense a little bit. He had the one-handed interception, then housed it the other way, did a backflip. Like, that's just Jamar being an absurd athlete, and that was kind of cool to watch. I enjoyed that. Did I sit down and lock in for the full game? No. Is there holes all over the place? Yes. Is it a product that needs a lot of work? Is it still a borderline laughingstock? All those things are true, but it captured my attention for a little bit. And then Burrow obviously came in the game. They had a little, if you didn't watch, they had a little trick play where he kind of dumped it off. I think it was to Achane, and then he got it back on a pitch, and then Joe Burrow took off. And I was sitting there like, oh, God, what's going on here? Because, with Joe Burrow and his history, you kind of just hold your breath. But he absolutely took off, shot right through the defense, and Toe looked great. Really got downfield in a hurry, jumped up, spiked the football. It's kind of a cool moment. And, Flacco, to see them there with T and Joe. Would I have turned it on if the Bengals weren't there? Absolutely not. But I did. The stars were there, and there were some good moments and some entertaining moments of the game. But they got to shrink the quarters, obviously. 66 to 50, whatever. That's just a little insane. You kind of feel for Van Pelt and Orlovsky, right? You can't really call the game. Like, it's going to be kind of awkward, and the people on the sidelines, like, it's not going to be great. But I thought they did the best they could. People out there saying ban the Pro Bowl, that was kind of my mindset. Last week when you get the news that, like, Shedeur Sanders is playing quarterback, I think they saved it a little bit with Burrow coming, one of the best players in the league. He's in the Pro Bowl. Obviously, Jamar was there. Puka Nacua was there as well. So a lot of big stars did show up and play, which I think helps them. And I don't really have the viewpoint that they need to ban it anymore. They need to make some adjustments. It's not great. It's never going to be what it once was. But, to get some of the best players in the league there, Super Bowl week, I'm here for it. There were some really nice plays that I thought in the game. But the biggest takeaways were some of the things that Joe Burrow said when he had a microphone in his face. And they asked him, you could tell the mood from Joe Burrow. He was happy to be there. Right, that's the big word with Joe Burrow. Oh, is he happy? How's he doing? Is he loving what he's doing right now? He seemed pretty obviously happy, I would say, at the game. They asked him. Somebody for ESPN was like, yeah, there's been a lot of dialogue about you not being happy in the city of Cincinnati. How do you feel? And he kind of laughed and was like, yes, I love it here in Cincinnati. Said everybody has bad days. Sometimes you have a bad day when you have a press conference. So that should quell all the nerves if they were still out there from Bengals fans. Clearly Joe Burrow wants to be here. He wants to get this thing fixed and headed in the right direction. Obviously, we hope we stop seeing him play in the Pro Bowl because that would mean he's playing in the Super Bowl. That needs to happen sooner rather than later. But if there was anybody out there that was still concerned about, oh, you know what, Joe Burrow, I don't know if he wants to be here. I don't know if he, is going to ask out of his contract, try to go somewhere else. That clearly is not happening anymore here at this point, which I think certainly is positive. And then someone else asked him if he looked up to any other quarterbacks, and he was like, well, not right now. I'm playing. I don't look up to anyone in the league. And that was just kind of like, okay, Joe Burrow's back, right? That was a typical Joe Burrow answer that you would get in like 21 and 22. The guy guy that kind of towed the line between cockiness and arrogance, something that a lot of us, really like to see out of Joe Burrow. I know me personally, when he kind of goes into that mode where it's like, yeah, he's being a little cocky right now, but we'll take it because he's going out there and backing it up on the field. Thought he showed that a little bit at times last night, and he was clearly he was trying out there. Like, you could tell that Joe and Jamar were there to make a statement. I don't know, make a statement's probably not the best way to put it, but put on a show a little bit. The first touchdown, he kind of was rolling to his right and then not looking to the left side of the end zone, and then kind of just fired it across his body. So he looked like he was having a good time out there. They made some good plays. Great to see Flacco out there as well, obviously. So I get the Pro Bowl is a bit of a laughing stock here at this point. I understand that, but I was pleasantly surprised, I guess, with how it transpired. Would I have even turned it on if Burrow, Chase, Higgins, and Flacco weren't there? Absolutely not. But I did, and, it was worth it. Didn't lock in the whole time, but it was, we saw some cool moments. You got some sound bites from Joe Burrow. You saw some cool plays. Jamar do some absurdly athletic things, and you move on, right? The other news of the day yesterday for Cincinnati, Troy Walters, wide receivers coach for the Bengals, he's going to be staying put. I guess it didn't even really cross my mind the possibility that he could be leaving, which I guess is just shame on me because he's an outstanding wide receiver coach. You hear Jamar and T speak so highly of him, and Zach certainly there as well. He's been here for several years, and credit to him because I think, when you're a part of the success that he has been from a wide receiver perspective, there are some teams out there that are interested in his services as an offensive coordinator, and he had an opportunity, I believe, to interview with the Bears, and he was like, you know what, I'm good. And respect for him for doing that. I mean, obviously, if he took a play caller job offensively, right, in Chicago, it wouldn't be as a play caller, but if he took a coordinator job, that would be a significant pay raise, but he wants to see this thing through. Jamar and T are his boys, and he understands that he's got a great opportunity to be a part of a world championship here in Cincinnati, and he's going to stay. And it also got me thinking a little bit because we talk about, Brian Callahan's of the world, and would Zach promote Brad Craigthorpe, the quarterback coach, if Dan Pitcher were to leave? Well, one thing that I haven't discussed is, Dan Pitcher's going to leave inevitably at some point. It doesn't look like it's going to be this year, but next year probably, or the year after that, he will be gone elsewhere, either in a play calling role offensively or as a head coach. I think Troy Walters now becomes an option, and that's not something that I have discussed here. He's been a receivers coach forever. How would he do as a coordinator? Well, if you're a coordinator here in Cincinnati, you're not calling the plays. ZT's doing that. So I think that would be an interesting person that could potentially fill that role of Dan Pitcher if ultimately he leaves in the coming season. So do think that was interesting, and I do think it's big for the Bengals to retain Walters. And again, in my opinion, I didn't even really realize that he could potentially be leaving, which I guess, again, is kind of shame on me because he's done such a great job. And you hear Jamar and T speak so highly of him, and Zach there as well, and he clearly is a critical piece to what they're doing here offensively. And he's clearly a great coach as well. I understand the talent level for Jamar and T is just absolutely through the roof, but you need someone to kind of hold their hand throughout the beginning of their career, teach them what it means to be a professional, and clearly find a way to get the most out of them. And I think Walter certainly has done that over the course of the past few years, and he's a huge catalyst for what the Bengals have been able to do offensively. So to keep him, obviously, is a pretty big deal. The Hendrickson stuff. So, we've gone back and forth on this. I would be shocked if he was playing with the Cincinnati Bengals next year. He's going to turn 32, I believe, in December. They kind of, said one more year. We got the band back together. The core offensively was back. Well, let's bring our star pass rusher back for 1 year. And it blew up in their face a little bit. And all the drama throughout the offseason, I'm really looking forward to not doing this throughout the entirety of this offseason, right? We're doing today's segment, and then we'll do the segments if they tag him or not tag him, and then we'll do the segment when he's no longer with the team, and then that'll be it for Trey Hendrickson. As opposed to last year, it's like every other day. It's like, well, he went to Adam Schefter and said this, so he went on McAfee and said this, so he was thinking about putting this out, and he had this, it was a Bengals practice, and he showed up to the practice but just wanted to meet with the media. We're not going to have that throughout this offseason, which certainly is nice. To recap, he comes in from New Orleans, the best free agent signing in Bengals history. Huge seasons, back-to-back 17.5 sacks, and didn't do much from a run-stopping perspective, which I do think is noteworthy. Because can Myles Murphy get to the ceiling of where Trey Hendrickson was at as far as rushing the passer? Probably not. We'll see. but he's a much more well-rounded player that can help you out against the run. And Shamar Stewart, the belief is if he can, not be a bust, that he can certainly help out against the run there as well. So that's not really Trey Hendrickson's game, and that's not really something he brought to the table. He was third down, money down, fourth quarter, big moment, get to the quarterback. That's who he was as a player. But, it felt like, this was coming to an end. And certainly when the Bengals made the decision just to give him the raise for the 1 year and not move forward with the long-term deal, the writing kind of was on the wall here. So the decision that needs to be made for Cincinnati is, do you just let him walk, or do you try to execute a tag and trade? And we've dove into this a little bit, but I do think it is fascinating to see what Cincinnati will do in this situation. Would it surprise any of us if they said, yep, we're good, hands off, let him walk, and hope to get a comp pick after that? Wouldn't surprise any of us. But I do think, and we talked about this a little bit when we were doing our mock off season, that it seems to me kind of like a no-brainer to tag and trade him. So let's kind of walk through it. If they don't do anything, they would hope to get a compensatory pick for 2027. The last time the Bengals were in this situation was with Jesse Bates, and most of us wanted him just to stay, whereas I'm sure there's some people out there that would like Trey Hendrickson to stay, but for the most part, it's like, let's do a tag and trade. Let's kind of move on here. We wanted Jesse Bates to stay. That wasn't going to happen. So their options were let him walk or execute a tag and trade. They decided to let him walk and ultimately got a third-round compensatory pick the following year. And in order for that to happen, there's some ins and outs that need to happen in order for you to get a comp pick and what round the comp pick is in. Basically, if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, you can't sign as many free agents in free agency as many as the players in free agency that leave your team, if that makes sense. So there's going to be a handful of free agents like Geno Stone, free agent. He's not going to be back. That counts as a guy that's a free agent on your team that you're not going to sign. That number has to be greater than the number of guys you sign in free agency this cycle. So that could potentially hamper your ability or your want to be really aggressive in free agency. But again, the comp pick would not be a 2026 comp pick. It would be a 2027 comp pick, which in my opinion, my whole philosophy is be as good as you can be right now. This isn't a rebuilding situation. This isn't a planning for the future. This is go win a Super Bowl next year. So a comp pick to me in 2027, I'm not thinking about 2027. I'm thinking about the 2026 NFL draft and how this team can get better in the short term. And again, you don't want it to hinder how aggressive you are in free agency. If you're sitting there like, well, we want to sign a couple of these guys, but we don't want to sign too many to the point where that number is higher than the guys that are free agents that are leaving our team, right? And that could, impact what round the comp pick is for Trey Hendrickson. Like that, to me, I don't want to worry about that. I'm almost at that point where it's like, don't even keep that in the back of your mind and just operate how you would in free agency, and whatever pick you get is the pick you get, right? So that's an option for Cincinnati, and I think we would all say that is the most likely option. And when you look across the league, it's not like these sign and trades are happening every single year, multiple times a year. Like they are borderline rare, I think is a fair term to use when talking about these deals. L'Jarius Sneed, the Chiefs did it when he went to Tennessee. I think that was the most recent one. Devontae Adams, that happened with the Packers and the Raiders, right? So they don't happen all the time. And when you're talking about an organization with the Bengals, it wouldn't shock any of us if it didn't happen again. Now, I am on the side of tag and trade him, right? Try to get something here for 2026. So how that would work is they have the opportunity on February 17th, between then and March 4th, they can tag a guy. So they would tag Trey Hendrickson and then immediately start getting on the phone with these other teams and trying to find a deal that works for both parties. Right? And the reason why a team would do this is because then they don't have to get in as big of a bidding war for Trey Hendrickson as they would if he was a free agent, right? If Trey Hendrickson is a free agent, somebody is going to overpay and he is going to cash in big time. So it would be advantageous for a team like, I don't know, the Bears, or maybe, I don't want to say the Packers, probably not them, the Cowboys maybe as a team that would be interested in him. It would be advantageous to get on the phone with Cincinnati after a tag and say, all right, let's trade for him. That way you're not competing with everybody on the free agent market. Now, what would you get back if you're the Cincinnati Bengals? The Bengals obviously were looking for a first-round pick last year. I do believe they would have moved him if they got a first-round pick. But Trey Hendrickson, where he's at, I mean, obviously he was a year younger then. Now he's a year older. You're not getting a first-round pick. Pretty safe to say you're not getting a second-round pick either. The question is, could you get a 2026 third-round pick for Trey Hendrickson? I don't know. I think there's a chance that you could. Again, you have to understand what the market looks like in the NFL as far as free agency goes. When you look at the market as a whole, there aren't these huge names that are available free agents. I think there is pretty much a general consensus wherever you look, whether it be PFF, ESPN, The Athletic, people view the top free agent at any position in this market as Trey Hendrickson. So that, to me, says that somebody that is desperate for an edge rusher in the short term, right, would be really aggressive to try to land Trey Hendrickson, and that means they would be willing to exercise a tag and trade. And if you're Cincinnati, you're kind of taking whatever at this point. Now the question becomes, of course, what do you value? How much more value do you have in a 2026 pick than a 2027 comp pick? For example, let's say you were in a spot with Trey Hendrickson where somebody was offering a 4th or 5th round pick in 2026, but you know in the back of your head, well, I could get a 3rd round pick in 2027 if we opt to not do a tag and trade and just kind of go from there. So that's something that the Bengals are going to have to weigh and decide this offseason. Again, I'm doing whatever I can to load up on picks here in 2026. I'm not worried about 2027. That's a year, removed from where we're at now. Another full season in between now and then, right? Where who knows what's going on with the health of your team or what the team looks like, right? Obviously, Joe, Jamar, and T are still going to be here, but are they at nearly as, high of a level as they're at right now? I mean, you hope so, but at some point, they're not going to be as good. I'm not worried about 2027. I'm worried about right here in 2026. So if you ask me, a 5th round pick in 2026 for Trey Hendrickson in a tag and trade or a 3rd round pick in 2027, I'll take the pick this year. Maybe that's a hot take. I don't know. But that's kind of just where I'm at right now personally. Now, the last part to this is if you're the Bengals, is there some worry in the back of your mind that you're in a situation where you tag him, now all of a sudden nobody has interest in Trey Hendrickson. You're like, oh, we're stuck with him here at this point. We tagged him. Then you got to pay him $30 million or something around that for what his tag would look like at this stage of his career, right? And then where do you go from there if you're the Bengals? Because that takes a huge hit to your salary cap, and now you're forced to stay with him, and things could get really, really ugly there. So there is some risk, right? Because you have to weigh out, like, okay, what's the interest level going to be from these teams across the league? How much would they be willing to give Trey Hendrickson or give us for a tag and trade? That is a question that obviously you have to answer. I don't think the Bengals would be in a bad spot. I would be shocked if they tagged him and couldn't find a trade partner. Again, you're not going to get a 1st or 2nd round pick, but nobody to give you a resource, some draft compensation for him. I would be totally shocked, but that's going to be a decision that Cincinnati has to make here going forward. And again, the deadline, or you can begin to tag guys February 17th, and that decision needs to be then made by March 4th. Is kind of your period that you're working with here if you are Trey Hendrickson here at this point. So we'll keep that something that we'll certainly continue to discuss here on the show, but we're not going to have a full-fledged Trey Hendrickson offseason like we have in previous years.